The message in the void. The message came encoded in neutrino pulses, carved through radiation storms and gravitational tides. 10 simple words etched into silence. Never provoke humanity. The cost is more than you know. It wasn't signed. Didn't need to be. Every species in the galactic communion had heard the whispers. Half-lost translations and fractured dialects passed from the tongues of scavengers and salvagers drifting through ancient wreckage. From the mouths of dying captains choking on plasma leaks, clutching black boxes with scorched human blood on their hands. I didn't believe it. Not then. I was Subcommander Valric of the Crinthal Ascendancy's 3rd Expansionary Fleet, and like most of our kind, I thought myself above myth, above fear. We were born of iron moons and bred for conquest. Our spines were laced with cobalt, our eyes with graphene membranes that could track missile trajectories mid-warp. Empires crumbled at the flick of our admiral's talons. So when the vote came to push into Sector 43, Terran claimed territory, I didn't hesitate. I lobbied for it. Humanity is fractured. I declared to the war chamber, the hologric cast in my battle-pinned chestplate in pale light. Their scrap world race. Scatterlings of a dying blue rock, clinging to outdated tech and animalistic pride. The warnings? Psychological warfare. There was applause. Cheers. Even the high strategist gave me the nod of commendation. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I remember the scavenger we'd intercepted on the fringe moons, an insectoid being with fractured antennae and cybernetic lungs, bleeding out through his filtration mesh. He had looked up at me, blood bubbling at the edges of his mandibles. "You're going into Terran space?" he rasped. I said nothing. He laughed until his lungs collapsed, then whispered, "Don't, please don't." But we went. Gods help us. We went. Terran space was what I expected. I thought we'd find wild mining rigs, scattered outposts, rogue traders desperate to barter for antimatter. What we found was silence. Too silent. Not empty. No, the void was full of ships, hulks, thousands of them, drifting like bones. Old cruisers from dozens of species. Even some Crinthal vessels marked missing in action centuries ago, their hulls scarred with fusion cuts I couldn't trace. No distress beacons. No bodies. Just absence. We advanced cautiously. First contact was with an automated relay station orbiting a burned-out gas giant. It activated the moment we entered orbit. The voice that came through wasn't synthetic. It was human. Turn back. No introduction. No threat. Just a warning, quiet and calm, like a parent telling a child not to touch the fire. Our admiral scoffed and ordered its destruction. The station self-destructed before the plasma torpedoes even reached it. Then the stars flickered. Not metaphorically. Literally. 4 of them. Gone. Sensors read no anomalies. But we saw it. The navigation officer screamed and backed away from the console. When I checked, his scream just repeated one message. Observed. Still, we moved forward. Proud. Arrogant, determined to prove ourselves above whatever primitive ghost games humanity played. On the 7th cycle, we lost the Dreadmaw, a full Dreadnought-class battleship without a trace. No explosion, no impact, no radio signals. 1 minute it was there, and the next, a hole in the fleet formation. It wasn't destroyed. It was deleted. The fleet slowed. Some argued for retreat. The admiral insisted we stay. "The humans are bluffing," he said. "They're afraid." Maybe they were. But fear, I would learn, is not weakness. Sometimes it is restraint. On the 12th cycle, we detected life signs ahead. A single Terran vessel. Small, angular, clearly outdated. No shields, no visible weapons. Just a cold hunk of titanium and ion vents, pulsing faintly in the black. The admiral laughed. "We found their scouting ship," he declared. "Let's show them what it means to cross us." He ordered it boarded. I was chosen to lead the team. Our boarding pod docked with a dull thud. Inside was pitch black, no lights, no heat. Our visors flicked into night mode as we entered. There were no signs of life, except for one sound. A whisper repeating through the comms. "You were warned." Suddenly, The door sealed behind us. The lights flared crimson. And then nothing. I woke up in a stasis cell. Alone. The ship was gone. So was the rest of the fleet. And on the wall of the cell, etched in something that looked suspiciously like alloy-scorched blood, were those 10 words again. Never provoke humanity. The cost is more than you know. Now I record this message. If you're hearing it, run. Burn the maps. Scramble the coordinates. Don't go looking for Earth. We did. We were warned. We ignored it. And now, I am the last. The tomb of empires. They left me drifting. After the boarding op turned into a waking nightmare, the Terran vessel jettisoned the stasis pod with me inside. No trajectory. No signal. Just a slow, spiraling fall into blackness. I don't know how long I floated. The stars blurred past in silent judgment. I saw nebulae I couldn't name. I dreamed in fragments of burning hulls, of Admiral Varis's face twisted in static mid-transmission, of the Dread Maw's silhouette flickering before vanishing like a dying candle. When I finally emerged from stasis, I was not in Crintal space. I was in the dead zone, a stretch of space that doesn't appear on any standard charts, marked only by what little the archivists call the Tomb of Empires, a place avoided not by treaty, but by fear. Ships that wander and do not wander out. The oldest spacefaring species speak of it in reverent tones, as if naming it might invoke it. It shouldn't have existed, not this close to Terran sectors. Yet there it was, and I, fool that I was now part of it. The moment my pod's emergency transponder activated, I got pinged, not by a rescue ship, not by any species I recognized, but by a Terran construct. It pulled me in on a gravity tether, an impossible feat given the raw distance and lack of power signature. Its design was ancient, cobbled together from what looked like hulls of at least 5 different species. The plating was layered with symbols, human words, worn down by centuries of radiation. The hull read, SS Archangel designation, witness class. Not warship, not colony. Witness. When the airlock cycled open, I stepped into silence. Dust hung in the air like frozen mist. Light flickered through broken fixtures, casting long shadows across rusted decks. But it wasn't empty. Lining the corridor walls were statues. No, not statues. Suits. Armor. Hundreds of Terran exorigs, arranged like a graveyard parade. Some bore scorch marks, others still held weapons. But not one moved. It was a memorial, a hall of the fallen. And at the end of that corridor, a voice spoke. Calm, female, unmistakably human. You were warned, Commander Valric. I froze. I started, but the voice cut me off. You stand in the resting place of Terran vengeance. Every empire that defied us lies in pieces here. Their bones re-engineered to build this ship. Their war songs encoded into our warning beacons. A hollow projection flared to life. I saw ships, the Corval Syndicate, the Sundari Hive, the Great Dominion, names I knew, names once feared. I watched them fall, not in war, in annihilation. Ships torn apart mid-warp, moons unspooled into rings of fire. Homeworlds turned into quarantined dead planets marked only by one repeated signal. Do not disturb. You thought restraint was fear, the voice continued, with something colder than hate, pity. You mistook civilization for weakness. You thought we needed war to prove strength. A second projection ignited. This time it showed Earth, lush, blue, teeming with life. But beneath that image ran strings of data, AI command protocols, orbital defense systems, retribution contingencies, and something labeled simply, extinction mode. I tried to speak again, to apologize, to offer surrender. But you can't apologize to a hurricane, or plead with fire. The voice answered before I could open my mandibles. You are not here to negotiate, Valric. You are here to witness. That's what this ship does. We find the ones who defy the warnings, and we show them the truth. Suddenly I felt it. Motion. The ship was moving, not through space, but through memory. The walls rippled. The lights dimmed. I was no longer aboard the Archangel. I was on the bridge of the 3rd Expansionary Fleet. I saw Admiral Varis. Saw myself. heard our arrogance. And then I watched it happen again. Ships gone. Signals drowned. Black holes forming where destroyers once sat. Human vessels made of living alloy, and synthetic mines blooming like nightmares across our flanks. We didn't lose. We were outclassed before we even started. The illusion snapped. I staggered, back aboard the Witness-class ship, knees shaking. My claws trembled. You want to understand, the voice said. Now you do. A pause. But you're lucky. We let you live. Few get to carry the message. The airlock hissed open again, and I understood. I was being sent back. To warn them. As I now drift back through hostile space in a silent escape pod, I think of how blind we were, of how much blood was spilled for pride, of how the humans never wanted war. They just wanted to be left alone. And now I understand what the message truly meant. It wasn't a threat. It was mercy. The tribunal of silence. I was found drifting near the border of Crintal space, days after the last stars behind me vanished. The recovery vessel didn't know what to make of me. My armor was scorched. My claws were cracked. My voice, when I finally spoke, came out in whispers. They thought I had gone mad. I didn't blame them. Back at high command, I was immediately placed under review. The survivors of the Crintal Council summoned what remained of our military leadership. Not that there was much left. The third expansionary fleet had been our pride, our hammer of conquest. Now it was an empty line on the roster and a whisper among frightened navigators. I was brought before the Tribunal of Silence. It was called that not out of ceremony, but consequence. None who had appeared before it had ever spoken again. Not publicly. Most simply disappeared. I was seated on a gravity platform before a semicircle of obsidian-robed figures. 12 in total, their faces masked behind expressionless synth metal visors. High Strategist Renkoff presided, his voice a perfect monotone. You entered Terran-claimed space without provocation. You lost an entire fleet. You returned in a human pod bearing no encryption, no logs. Explain yourself. I should have begged for mercy. Instead, I stood. My legs wobbled under me, not from weakness, but from the truth still echoing in my bones. I warned you all, I said, but I was too late. Murmurs rippled through the shadows. I was not captured. I was educated. I continued, voice growing stronger. The humans didn't kill us out of rage. They erased us out of restraint. They gave us every chance to turn back. We mocked it. Strategist Renkoff leaned forward. You claim the humans spared you to deliver a message. What message? I met his visor dead on. You were warned, and still you came. For a moment, nothing. Then the room erupted. Strategists shouting over one another, accusing, denying, panicking. They never had the strength. This is a ruse. Terran tech is 2 centuries behind. I took a slow breath, then drew the only object I kept from the human vessel, a shard of alloy, faintly humming. I laid it on the tribunal floor. Scan it. Renkoff's assistant approached reluctantly, then scanned the alloy. His breath caught. He turned the datapad toward the tribunal. The readout pulse read, element composition, unknown, nanostructure, adaptive, origin signature, pre-singularity human, modified, tech class, restricted, alert, cognition hazard, silence, and then laughter. Not mocking, not dismissive, nervous, hysterical, terrified. Renkoff dismissed the chamber. They didn't execute me. They didn't exile me. No, they locked me away in the deepest vault of the Central Archive, a silent cell beneath the crust of our homeworld. No comms, no visitors, just me and the message. I was to be their secret, a shameful record to be buried. But secrets, I've learned, are like gravity. The harder you try to escape them, the harder they pull. Days, or maybe weeks, passed. Hard to tell in the archive. Then, one night, the lights flickered red. Emergency sirens wailed. A whisper echoed through the ventilation ducts. You were warned. My cell door hissed open. Standing there was a shape. Human, not armored, not weaponized, just present. He was middle-aged, Short beard, graying hair, civilian clothes, simple cloth, worn boots. But his eyes, I'll never forget them. They weren't cruel or angry. They were tired and infinitely patient. He stepped inside and said only one word. Ready? I swallowed. For what? He smiled gently. For the part where you help him understand. Before I could speak again, I was gone. Not physically, mentally. I fell. Memories not mine poured into my skull. Centuries of Terran history, encoded into neural bursts. Wars, triumphs, mistakes. A history written not in victory, but survival. Earth had nearly destroyed itself before it ever looked to the stars. They weren't forged in peace. They were forged in fire. I awoke in orbit. A Terran vessel, larger than anything I'd ever imagined, hung above Crintal Prime. It didn't deploy weapons. It didn't hail our command. It just floated, watching. Beneath it, chaos bloomed. Our people panicked, fled, begged. Some raised shields. Others fell to their knees. One human ship. No shots fired. Just a message. You were warned. This is your second mercy. There won't be a third. And me? I watched it all from the viewport of a ship I didn't remember boarding, with a data pad in my claws. It contained coordinates, not just Terran space, other targets, other empires, other fleets. The humans hadn't come to conquer. They'd come to remind the galaxy. Mercy is not weakness. It is the last warning before wrath. And I was now their witness. The chain of consequence. They didn't ask me to betray my people. They simply gave me the choice not to lie to them anymore. That's the difference, I think. The core fracture between how we, the Crintal, and humanity see power. We enforce obedience through fear. Humans offer clarity through consequence. One collapses when questioned. The other sharpens. After the Terran ship withdrew from Crintal orbit, chaos became doctrine. The council fell silent. The military fractured. Our homeworld activated the planetary barrier for the first time in 9 centuries, designed to keep invaders out, but in this case, it only sealed our terror within. No retaliation orders came. No rescue fleets dispatched. Instead, encrypted distress signals began bleeding in from outer sectors. One by one, fringe colonies, empires that scorned Terran diplomacy, started disappearing from star maps. Not in war, in erasure. The Andari Pride's flagship was found drifting in a perfect sphere of melted space-time. Crew flash fossilized in place. Their last message, distorted by radiation, contained 3 words. Forgive our pride. The Valon Matriarchy's border moon suddenly registered as uninhabitable. Biogenic warfare? No, humans didn't release a virus. They turned off the moon's atmospheres. Gone, like flipping a switch. And the worst? Not a single Terran ship was spotted near any of it. They were ghosts. Vengeance without form. Judgment without jury. And every victim had one thing in common. They had ignored the warning. I knew what I had to do. The datapad they left me contained more than locations. It held messages, personal ones. Private transmissions, encrypted in human code, but translated for me. Testimonies. Screams, apologies, a database of every time someone had ignored a warning and the price they paid. One stood out. It was a log entry from a human named Captain Lena Voss, dated nearly 50 cycles ago. She was commanding a Terran diplomatic mission to the Sharan Imperium, offering trade, alliance, and mutual defense. They declined with hostility, fired on her unarmed vessel. She didn't retaliate. She recorded this instead. I've logged our position, recorded our offer, and preserved our restraint. If I die here, let it stand as proof we asked for peace. If the Imperium vanishes tomorrow, let it be known we asked first. The Sharan Imperium was now a myth. Their worlds lost. Their systems classified as dead zones by cartographers too frightened to update the maps. No Terran ever claimed credit. But now I understood. That was their doctrine. Record. Offer. Warn. Walk away. If provoked, erase. I spoke to no one as I left Crintal space. The ship they gave me was silent. Fast. invisible to our own sensor systems. I passed through borders like shadow through mist. My first stop was there, X9, an outpost of the Uxury Dominion, known for capturing Terran scientists during the early cycle skirmishes. The Dominion had long assumed humanity was too fractured to retaliate. I found their command center hollowed out, walls scorched from the inside by heat levels no conventional weapon could produce. The air still buzzed with magnetic residue. Pinned to the command throne was a single message, carved into the metal with a molecular drill. You were told. You chose this. I uploaded the coordinates of the next target into the ship's drive. A path of blood. Not guided by rage, but by ledger. The Terrans weren't at war. They were settling debts. And I was holding the accounts. One night cycle. I don't know how long into the journey. I asked the ship something aloud. Why me? A pause. Then the voice came, soft, genderless, almost curious. Because you saw, and you lived. But I was part of it. I whispered. I helped lead the Third Fleet. I pushed the incursion. And we let you remember it. The lights dimmed. Guilt is the root of truth. And truth is what the others need to hear. I stared at the stars, hundreds of them blazing past. Each one a reminder of how many had looked at humanity and chosen arrogance. Each one a marker of how few were left to regret it. I began leaving beacons, not weapons, messages. I carved the warning in every language I knew, on asteroid faces, on the husks of dead dreadnoughts, in plasma glyphs along warp lanes. Never provoke humanity. The cost is more than you know. I didn't expect to be believed, but I wasn't doing it for them anymore. I was doing it for what came next, because I'd seen the final entry in the datapad, not coordinates. Not a warning, just a title. Protocol Thanatos, in the event of galactic consensus. I didn't understand it at first, until I saw what it meant. If enough of the galaxy chose to ignore the final mercy, if enough still believed the lie that humanity was bluffing, then the protocol would activate, and Earth would stop pretending. It wouldn't be vengeance, or justice. It would be the end of war itself, by ending everything. And so I flew. From world to world, from empire to empire, not as a diplomat, not as a survivor, but as a warning carved into flesh. Their final chance to listen, their final chance to remember, before the silence came for them. 2. The ones who listened. Not everyone ignored the warnings. That's what kept me going, I think. The rare moments where fear didn't drive leaders to dig deeper into their bunkers or retaliate with arrogance. Some heard the echoes of vanished fleets. Some believed. And those species still exist. I remember one such world. Naris 4. Jungle world. Subtropical moons. Amphibious dominant species with layered vocal cords and translucent skin. Their society revolved around ancestral memory. Oral records passed from generation to generation, unbroken across epochs. When I arrived, their sentries intercepted my approach. Their weapons were drawn, yes, but their eyes, they weren't angry. They were haunted. They brought me before their elder council, deep beneath the canopy in a root temple carved from obsidian branches and bioluminescent vines. No thrones, no pomp, just truth. The high listener approached, his gills fluttering in tension. You bear the human mark. I nodded. You're the harbinger. That word struck me. Not messenger, not executioner. Harbinger. Not by choice, I told him. But I won't lie to you. The chain is moving. You may be next. He bowed his head. We know. That's why we never touched the Terran relay. My pulse stilled. What? He turned and gestured toward the far end of the temple. There, half swallowed by moss and time, was a Terran beacon, intact, active, still humming faintly, left there nearly 40 cycles ago. A diplomatic signal station, unarmed, broadcasting the same message on a loop. We come in peace. If denied, we leave. If harmed, we do not forget. The Naharians had done nothing. They didn't reply. They didn't attack. They didn't even attempt to study it. They left it alone. And for that, they were untouched. Why didn't you reach out? I asked quietly. The high listener chuckled, a sound like wind through hollow reeds. Because only a fool talks when the gods are whispering. That night, I joined their memory circle. They offered no weapons, no defenses, only understanding. We shared stories under the glow of drifting pollen. They listened to what happened to my fleet. I listened to what they saw before it ever happened. They told me they'd seen the signs. Sky pulses, war ghosts, entire constellations shifting by a fraction. They felt Earth's silence on the edge of their dreams. One child, a youngling barely past spawning age, asked me something that silenced the whole gathering. Do the humans hate us? I paused, then told her the truth. No, but they remember everything, and they forget nothing. She nodded solemnly, not afraid, just respectful. And I realized then, maybe the galaxy's mistake wasn't underestimating human weapons. It was underestimating human memory. Humanity doesn't just fight back. They catalog every pain. They archive every slight. And when they return, it's not in rage. It's in judgment. Before I left Naharis 4, the high listener handed me a gift, a polished obsidian pendant etched with 3 interwoven rings. It's a memory sigil, he said, to prove you walked among those who listened. I wore it from that day on, not as armor, as hope, because if one species could survive by respecting the silence, maybe more could. Maybe the firestorm could still be held back. Maybe. But that hope burned dim when I reached Varellan Reach. The Varellans had seen the erasures, too. But instead of humility, they chose escalation. They built ghost fleets, deployed automated hunter drones programmed to trigger at the detection of human biosigns. They even tried weaponizing fragments of captured Terran AI cores, technology they didn't understand. I arrived in time to see their retaliation attempt. They'd unleashed a mimic virus, designed to flood Terran frequencies, simulate distress signals, and lure humanity into a trap. It almost worked. For 3 hours, Terran beacons across 5 systems went dark. Then, without warning, a Varellan moon cracked in half. No ships, no energy weapons, just rupture, tectonic failure from the inside out. 3 days later, the central sun of the Varellan Reach blinked. Not exploded, not gone supernova. Just off. I still don't know how. No species does. I only know it was left in orbit, slowly rotating where the star had once burned. A single human satellite, bearing a familiar phrase. You were warned. The cycle was accelerating. The further I flew, the more I saw. The more the warnings were ignored, the harsher the corrections became. The galaxy still didn't understand. Humanity wasn't fighting anymore. They were finishing. And I was the echo they sent ahead. A shadow of what came after diplomacy. The final knock before the void. Now I fly with more than a message. Now I carry Protocol Thanatos. Still sealed. Still dormant. But the lock glows fainter with each ignored warning. I pray it never opens. Because inside is what happens when humanity runs out of mercy. And if that day comes, there won't be a last chapter. Just an end. When mercy ends. The lock on Protocol Thanatos dimmed again today. Just one shade. A fractional hue of red shifting to pale amber on the containment seal inside my ship's vault. It shouldn't have mattered. But I've seen what follows every shift in color. Somewhere, someone else chose pride over survival. Somewhere, a council mocked an old Terran broadcast. Somewhere, an admiral decided to make an example of a human outpost. And somewhere else silence followed. Because this is how it ends. Not in war, but in correction. I tried again. I landed on Ulrich Theta, capital moon of the Oven Syndicate. They hadn't crossed paths with Terrans yet, not directly. But they were next. Their war fleets were amassing. Spies embedded in Terran space. Early reports said they were developing a prototype device capable of mimicking human comms and redirecting beacons. They thought they were being clever. I met with their prime executor in his obsidian tower, a monument to conquest and synthetic greed. His voice was cold, his grin full of teeth filed into jagged pride. You're the human errand boy? No, I said. I'm the echo before the storm. He poured wine made from the glands of extinct reptiles and never looked away. Tell them we're not afraid. If Earth thinks it can intimidate us, I slid the datapad across his polished desk before he could finish. A still frame, frozen, pixelated, but unmistakable. His homeworld, gone. He blinked. That's a falsification. Time-stamped 12 hours ago. He stared. I didn't move. A moment passed. Then he laughed. A nervous, pitiful sound. They'll come for you too, after they're done. I stood and looked him in the eye. No, they already did. I lived. He didn't stop me as I walked out. By the time I reached orbit, the Syndicate fleet was already scattering. Fractured signals, civilian ships fleeing in reverse warp, some trying to cloak, others simply disappearing from local scans. None of it mattered. I knew what I'd see next. The stars blinked. Then came the echo, dull cosmic, like thunder and vacuum. The Executor's Tower was no longer on any planetary record, just a line of corrupted data. That night, alone in my ship, I did something I hadn't done since the Third Fleet fell. I opened my old personal log, not the one the Terrans gave me, the one I started as a proud sub-commander. Before the message, before the witnessing, it was filled with plans, fleet maneuvers, conquest strategies, Crinthal pride. I deleted all of it. One file remained, a vid from my hatchling years. Just a moment, me sitting on the observation deck of our homeworld's orbital ring, staring out at the stars. My voice, young, small, asking my mother, "Do you think we'll meet aliens one day?" And her voice, soft but firm, "If we do, I hope they're better than us." I watched that vid 10 times before I slept. Then I closed it for good. 2 days later, I received a message, not from the humans, from a ship I didn't expect to hear from. The Zalari custodians, old species, isolationist, the galaxy's memory keepers. They live inside gas giants, minds expanded into planetary consciousness arrays. They don't fight. They remember. And they remembered me. Their message was short. We have analyzed a pattern. Protocol Thanatos is 82.3% primed. Mercy cycle approaching final echo. One question remains. Will the galaxy kneel or burn? I replied only this. Neither. The ones who kneel will survive. The ones who burn will deserve it. They responded with coordinates. Not to a target. To Earth. I stared at the screen for a long time. No outsider had been granted coordinates to Earth's core world in over 100 cycles. Even those who'd fought beside them in the Tarshan collapse were never allowed that deep. I tried to deny what it meant. But I knew they were calling me home. Or maybe not home. Maybe to the edge of the final judgment. Either I had proven myself, or I was to be used in the final act. And when I cross that line, the last light of mercy will flicker once, then never again. I leave now, to Earth, not to plead, not to negotiate, but to see, to stand at the edge of the storm, and know if the fire still waits behind the glass. Because Protocol Thanatos is nearly ready, and the galaxy has heard the warning too many times. This time, the silence won't be followed by echoes, only consequence. And still they whispered. Earth did not look like a death world, not from orbit. It glowed blue, peaceful, wrapped in clouds and oceans. A gentle swirl of weather systems and sunlight refracting through the atmosphere. No defense platforms were visible. No fleets. No orbital rings. No grav lances or planetary scale shields. Just a world. Quiet. Humble, like it didn't know the galaxy was on fire because of it. But I knew better. I was the first non-Terran allowed this close in generations. And even then, the coordinates hadn't been sent. They had been allowed to arrive. Like my ship had been steered subtly, invisibly, pulled into Earth's gravity, well, not by propulsion, but by decision. I landed in what looked like a meadow. That's right, a meadow, rolling green grass. Trees, a quiet wind, birds, the sound of life. It disarmed me until I looked closer. The trees were watching, not literally, but beneath the bark, sensors, drones woven into root systems, atmospheric filters, defense nodes hidden beneath soil. I realized then Earth had no weapons on display, because Earth was a weapon. A man waited at the center of the field, not armored, not surrounded by guards, just standing, older than I remembered seeing in most species, white hair, olive skin, a weathered Terran face with eyes too calm for what he represented. "Welcome," he said. I stepped down. Slowly. The grass didn't crunch. The air smelled perfect, like spring after rain. "You're the one they call the Harbinger," he said. "I didn't choose that title." "No, but you earned it." I paused. "Why bring me here?" He gestured to the sky. "The lock on Protocol Thanatos is at 92%. I nodded. "You plan to unleash it?" He looked at me with pity. "We don't plan anything. We respond. That's what you all misunderstood. We didn't choose to become what we are. You made us this." I felt that, deeply, because I had watched it, species by species, playing at war like it was a game, poking Earth like it was a weakling to be taught a lesson. We never asked what made them hold back for so long. We only asked what would happen if they didn't. And now, we were close to finding out. He led me through a simple structure, wood and steel, no tech visible, but every surface whispered with subtle power. Quantum shielding so tight it didn't hum. Artificial gravity so finely tuned I forgot I wasn't on my home world. The facility was filled with nothing but silence, and one vault, smooth, circular, glass and obsidian, suspended above a pit of light. Inside floated a key, small, simple, hanging midair. Protocol Thanatos. I couldn't read it, but I felt it. Entropy, weaponized silence. Something older than physics and younger than revenge. Something only a species like humanity could create, born from centuries of restraint and recorded betrayal. And still it was sealed. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Because you're the last variable." "Me?" He nodded. "You've seen what we are. You've warned them. But still, some continue. Still some dig, threaten, mock. We've removed fleets, turned stars dark, left planets spinning alone. And still they whisper." He looked at me, not with anger, with sadness. "So now you decide. Do we give the galaxy one final mercy? Or do we give it peace?" "Peace?" I asked, nearly a laugh. He stepped aside. "Mercy is what we offer the living. Peace is what we offer when they won't stop." I looked at the vault, and I realized why I was here. Not as witness, not as punishment, as a final test. A galaxy's fate in the hands of the one who survived their first mercy. I didn't reach for the key. I turned, faced him, and said the only thing that felt true. They're not ready, but some are trying. Some have listened. Don't end it yet. He nodded, not agreement, not rejection, just acknowledgement. And then the lock on Protocol Thanatos pulsed. Red to amber, amber to yellow, yellow to pale green. It wasn't over, but it wasn't beginning either. Not yet. They had heard my voice. One more time. I left Earth in silence. No armies, no applause, just sky and clouds and wind. Behind me, the message began broadcasting again, across all channels, all frequencies, in every language. One final time. Never provoke humanity. The cost is more than you know. And now, they'll know I mean it, because I carry your silence. And silence is the last sound before the fire.